Right, hello everybody. Welcome to what I think is the 5th stream now, so we're actually quite a way into this series as far as new series go. So last time we were stuck on a problem where we were essentially trying to get smoothing to work on spheres, and we were close. We got very close, but it didn't. End up working. We spent most of the stream just trying to debug that, and unfortunately, didn't come to a solution. However, someone in chat had a look at the code and actually found a bug, which is like super cool. So big shout out to Duck Title. They actually took the time to go through everything and find out what the issue was. That was like awesome. Like I'm really happy with the fact that people have like helped out. Like it feels really rewarding, I guess, that people are actually participating in this, and the fact that people are taking the time to debug something's awesome. Now I've just been messing around with the code and I've broken it again, but I will show you the result that we ended up getting at the end of yesterday, which is this. So super happy with this. Like it basically looks almost exactly what I had in mind, and yes, there's still a way to go. There's still some edge cases to work out and some improvements to make, but we're 50% there basically, at least in terms of the visuals and the end result of it. So one thing you'll notice is like this corner doesn't raise, simply because we don't have blocks that are larger than 1 voxel space at the moment, but that's an edge case that will be taken care of soon. Like there's some new assets that I've been given, and that's something that we'll be looking at next. Also stuff like here, there's obviously a drop that's kind of intended, but rather than just looking like all one shape, it'll, you know, potentially have some like rock texture exposed here, and obviously the top bit will probably be like grass or whatever the assigned material is that you're working with. So you can quite, I hope, easily see how this system that we've been building up to will work in the future and how it will look as an end result, at least partially. So with that being said, we're going to just make some general code improvements. I've already begun and, like I say, experienced a crash, so this will be I guess a fun time to try and debug it, or not so fun time, I suppose. And we'll have to work out what the bug was that I introduced, because as far as I'm aware, I've just been introducing different variables and such, so we'll see if I can find something that's immediately wrong with it. It might just be like an error reading out of bounds or something on an array, which I think it might be. So I'm going to turn off smoothing on large plane now actually and see if that works, because the large plane that we have as a brush extends right to the edge of the world boundaries, and so when it applies smoothing or tries to apply relative smoothing, it will go outside of the bounds of the map and say, oh, I can't access this space, and then it will crash out. So I'll quickly disable that just so I can see if it's working, because I've just been trying to add a feature in at the moment, which is to get the underside of the sphere smoothing as well, not just the top. So if we go to, where is it? Change voxel plane XY, we'll just comment that out quick, just so it doesn't try and apply smoothing on that, so it doesn't need to currently. If we go to content, we open this up. I don't know how long it'll take to compile, but it shouldn't be too long. Let's play it. See if it crashes again. There's a big chance that it might do. No, there we go. So it is working now. So yeah, it was just the out of bounds issue, which we are going to move on to fixing, I think, today, if we've got time. That, I think, will be a tedious process, but it's certainly something that we can look at, so that's fine. So it's partially working actually. It's almost working out of the box, which I didn't expect. So a few tweaks, obviously, like the offset currently is in the wrong place, but yeah, no, that works fine. Some of the blocks will obviously have to be rotated around. Again, not that much of a problem. So yeah, super cool. Right, so that's actually nearly working now, which is great. Don't know if there's any bugs that I've introduced as a part of that. Not too fast, really. But yeah, this is kind of the end result. So this is essentially what I would be aiming for in terms of usability. Like you choose your circular brush in the editor, which isn't built yet, obviously, but you choose your circular brush, deform it to the size that you want using maybe like scroll wheel and control keys or something like that, and then you'd be able to paint it on any surface present in the scene. And in this case, it just happens to be a flat plane that I've introduced using another brush. So you could quickly see how you could stack these up and maybe get quite complex results. And because this terrain smoothing is a toggleable thing as well, you can quite easily turn this off if you don't actually want it. Like, say if you literally just do want a circle of cubes for whatever reason, or you just want to paint individual blocks, maybe for like a house, and you don't want them to have these same properties, you literally can just toggle that off in code, or in the future case it'll be toggle it off in the UI at the press of a button, and it'll turn it on and off. So that's something that's really nice about this system, is it's incredibly flexible. Like, I don't want to limit people too much. Like, I just want to provide some base raw functions that I think are useful and not limit how those are combined in any way if possible. Obviously there's going to be some areas where you can't use two settings at once, or you can't, you know, do that kind of thing, but for the most part this is fine now. So that's awesome. We've got that working. The underside is pretty much working as well. I'm going to make some quick tweaks to how the pattern shifting works, I think, so that like this block, for example, is in the right place. But all I'll do for that is, like, say if it's like, it'll be a temporary fix. It'll be like, if it's this block, spin it around, you know, or something like that. So at least we know that it's working, and I think for the most part it is choosing the right block. Obviously this bit here doesn't look quite right, so I'll investigate that. It is at least partially doing something, and that's the main thing. So yeah, super happy with that. Like, thank you so much, Duck Title. Like, without your help I wouldn't be able to get this working, because it was a very simple problem actually. It's one of those things that you don't spot but kind of is obvious in hindsight, so I'll show you where that is. If I go to right at the bottom, I believe it was this function, all I simply hadn't done is included a break. So what it was doing is it was going through the first result, and then every time it was going, oh, let's now all do all of this as well. Let's overwrite that information, which obviously isn't correct. So that was causing issues. What I need to do now, the first step towards fixing that system and making it actually work properly, is currently I've just copied and pasted the code that checks the top side to see what shape it should be. So it's not actually checking the correct spaces at the moment, like adjacent to a voxel, to see where, like it's not checking the right offsets, like it's checking them as if it was checking them on the top side. So that's fine, that's a simple change. I'll just quickly show you what edits I've made to the code, just to get this working, at least at a base level. Obviously there's still a lot of work to do, but it's mostly there. So instead of wrapping this whole thing in an if statement that just sees if there's a space above and a block below a block, which would only work for the top side, I've instead introduced two variables. One called attempt to smooth, which just determines whether or not this whole thing should take place in the first place. And in actual fact I could just inline that, couldn't I? So if I get rid of that, I'll just stick that in there instead. Makes it easier. Right, so all this is saying is if oh no, there was a reason I put it outside, and it's because I was relying on it again later, so I'll put that back in. My mistake. But anyway, so we have attempt to smooth, which just checks the top or the bottom and says, is there empty space, is there air there? And if there is, then we know that we should at least attempt smoothing. It might not be that any smoothing is actually done, but at least it will try, at least it will have a look. So then we've introduced this other variable, or I've introduced this other variable called topside, which all that does is says whether or not the block that you're looking at is exposed on the top or the bottom. So it just says if attempt to smooth, and again actually we don't need that in that condition. Which means we can inline this. Yeah, I was correct the first time. So we'll put that back in. It's like it's only today that I've been working on this code, which is why I've not refactored it properly yet. But that's a quick refactor there. So yeah, we're running to see if there's space above or below, and then we're saying okay. Then we have a boolean to determine whether or not we are looking at the top or the bottom inside of this if statement. And then we pass that through to both the adjacent corner average function and the determine best block for corner height function. So this one is the one which I need to edit, which checks the relevant spaces and then increments or decrements the right variable, essentially. And for this one, now I realised that yes, this will need tweaking slightly, but I realised that all we're doing here is we can still use the same patterns because this function will produce the same output regardless of whether or not it's upside down because of this toggle that we've introduced. So all we have to do in here, and I'll show you that now, is if it's on the bottom, essentially, we just add 4 to the rotation that's output as a part of this, because we've already checked each rotation kind of in the voxel. So adding 4, all that does is tells us that it's an upside down rotation and not a normal rotation, essentially. And then that information will be later passed on to the apply rotation function, which will probably make changes to just to get it to work properly. So first point of call is we need to go through the rather tedious process of rewriting this so that we are doing what we're supposed to be. I'll apologise ahead of time. This will be kind of boring. I'd probably, if you're watching this on YouTube, like skip through because it will be similar to other stuff that we've done already. There'll be nothing fancy about it, really. So yeah, let's get started. So what we want to do is essentially the same thing, but change where we're checking. Now, actually thinking about it, that'll probably be as simple as simply changing some stuff to positive, changing some stuff from positive to negative, I believe. I could be wrong, but that seems like the most obvious thing to me. Like, because we're doing it upside down instead, rather than checking above, we're checking below. And because we want the same output regardless of the rotation, or the orientation, I should say, the check should just be inverted, or the check position should just be inverted. So I don't think there's anything especially complicated about this, to be honest, and this should be sufficient. I might be making some obvious mistake or whatever, but we'll deal with that when we get to it, and we'll test it in a second. So heading down to case 3, there we go, I think that's the last one. Yeah, that should have fixed that issue. There is still the issue of the offsets and also some of the rotations not being fully correct, but at least we can see if this checks all of the appropriate blocks this time. and applies a transformation. So again, we're using the big sphere, so it's a bit laggy. Once we've done all this testing, I will change it to a different shape so that we're not, you know, chugging in the editor and spawning everything in, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. So just waiting here for it to load. There we go. Put it on unlit mode. So yeah, the rotations are wrong, but it seems to me like it is doing what it's supposed to, which is great. Just seems like, you know, these blocks here need rotating 90 degrees and so on. I'm sure some are like 180 out of whack or something like that. And there is the issue as well of them being shifted one down because of where the origin currently is, but that should be a relatively easy fix, so we'll tackle that in a second as well. I think we had issues with it before, but it shouldn't be that big of an issue really. So if we go back to a bit of code that we've not actually checked that much recently, but we did earlier on in this series. We've got the rotation code here, and my thinking is currently that we just kind of change these two around. I think the 180 rotations and 0 rotations are fine because they're just inverted essentially, like there shouldn't be anything wrong with that. So we change this one to 270, this one to 90. I think that should fix the problem. We'll see. Might not do, but we'll have a look. So this is just for the underside. I'm going to play again. Yeah, I do definitely need to change the amount of shapes in the scene as soon as possible, but it just so happens that this shape's a really good one to test on, so. Here we go. So, has that fixed it? Not quite. It has just inverted everything. But we're nearly there. We're nearly there. I think we just need to change 0 and 180 around now. And that's working as it should do. Near enough. But yeah, top side looking great. Really looking great so far. So let's try that flip. So let's try changing this to 180 and this to 0. Now I might be doing this in completely the wrong order. It might just be that we need to reverse the order of the rotations from 270 to 0 rather than 0 to 270, and if that's the case, well, we'll probably know if that's the case if this doesn't work, and then we'll test that as well. And we'll just mess around until we get the right result, because that's all it is at the end of the day, just tweaking things until we get what we're supposed to, really. There's no... I mean, there is maths behind it and there is a science behind it, but it's not something we need to think too much about, because we're only changing 4 numbers. We can kind of go through trial and error. But there's a few other things actually on the task list that we need to do, other than getting this to work. And one of them is to make sure that... Yeah, okay, so that obviously that's messed it up completely. But yeah, one of them is to make sure that our shapes are not having, like the circular shapes, for example, are not having smoothing applied to them in a square, because we don't want the entirety of their cube volume to be affected by the smoothing brush. We only want their like radius +1. So we'll have to make a custom function called like So we've obviously got the smoothing cube function down here. Where is it? Here. So we'll just need to make a circular variant of that, which will just like take in some additional parameters. You know, it'll be like same for what we did for the making the actual brushes themselves. We'll have like a flat circular one, a sphere one, an ellipsoid one. Relatively straightforward, nothing complicated going on there. So if we go back up to where we were, reverse the order of these, see if this fixes it. Should be a relatively quick compile. There we go. Press play. I think I said a few streams ago actually I should probably get like a mini game or something for the stream for when stuff like this is happening, where I'm doing longer compile times, especially as the project gets more complicated. Like I imagine rebuilds will take forever, so maybe some kind of event system or something would be nice. So this is again not quite there. See if I can work out why, and then we'll apply the exact transformation we need. So some of them seem to be in the right orientation. These ones are, for example. We'll just see if they work on all sides. Not quite. And actually, out of curiosity, I want to see if they're the same block as well, because if they're not, then we know that some of the other systems aren't working quite as intended. So that's the wedge with one corner shaved off, I should say, and this one I think is the same as well, so that looks fine. I think maybe we just need to work on the offset a little bit. So I think it is rotating in the right direction, but the offset is probably incorrect, I would have guessed, watching this. The one thing we can do is there's another change that we can actually make, and that's to get the rotating function down here, the checking function, to rotate in the opposite direction. So that's as simple as saying if top, do it this way, and then move all of those into there, and having an else, essentially copying the same thing and then just reversing the order of the numbers. So that'll start off as 3. Basically we're just going through one by one, changing each of them. So starting at 0, 1, 2, there we go. And if we've done that, oh, I don't want to zoom in all the way. If we've done that, it should hopefully either fix the problem we're having, or at least we know now that we're checking it properly and we can revert the changes that we made up in the rotation function here. So we'll save that quick, do a recompile. Takes its time, of course, always does. Or maybe I need like a side project, like I don't know, something I can do like on one window and swap between the two. But I don't know what I do. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's because the code base is getting slightly larger now in that script, but the compile times are getting a lot longer at this point. I think before we were able to make a change and it'd sometimes only take, I don't know, 10 seconds at the most. Now though it seems to be taking a lot longer. Like I've had a compile time that I could have sworn was taking 3 minutes at some point. It might not seem long to some people, especially on larger projects, but that time definitely adds up the more you do it. And I don't want to, you know, have wasted potentially like half an hour on a stream just waiting for the compiler to do its thing. Seems to be especially slow this time for whatever reason. The one thing I can do actually while we wait is supposedly, I won't bring it up on stream so none of you can like see all the people that I'm chatting to, but I think I've been sent on Facebook the new models, so I'll see if I can grab them quick. I should have a new zip folder. Got the new planes in it to replace the current ones that we have. So if we extract to, extract to desktop, there we go. This should have all of the new files in it. So if we open this up, grab all of those, open up the editor and bring it into basic blocks. I don't know if it'll like compiling and importing at the same time, but I suppose it's worth finding out. Check my settings quick. I don't think I want a material for these yet. Then again, they might have one attached, so I'll leave that on. I don't know how Josh has done them. Import all of them. Oh, and the compile's done as well. Nice. So, as you can see from here quick, before I go back into the game. Oh, I accidentally dragged them all in, but hey ho. You can see that we have a new file set. Now looking at these, I'm not sure if they're the right dimension actually. I'm pretty sure these are a lot steeper. Yeah, they are. So I'm going to have to ask him to revise those slightly. But at least they look like they're the right shape. The nice thing about the voxel editor that I've made is we can actually just adjust the scaling and these should snap straight in theory, because all the voxel generation system is just relative offset placements and stuff like that. There's a few key variables that we can change and it updates the entire project. But anyway, let's remove them from the scene. Press play again. See if we've fixed the issue. Potentially not. We might have to revert what we did in the rotations, but this will at least remove one potential like source of issue now. And it's crashed. Great. Where's it having the issue? Line 212. Ran out of memory. That's strange. I don't think that's related to my code, so it might just be like a memory leak or something. Let's double check. Wait for the restart. So if I think about this, I guess logically I need to know exactly how it is that the upside down rotations will have changed the properties of the shape, just so then I can work out the actual rotations that need to be applied, or the actual combination of rotations. So I think I'm correct in thinking that I need to do it in reverse order, because we've obviously flipped it round. However, I think it needs to be offset by a certain amount, because each of the rotations kind of have like a set starting place, and that set starting place determines the correct starting rotation of each shape. So these values in here, like 0, -1, -1, -1, determines that the one with the block with one raised corner, this 0 value, should start, at least in the logic of the code, in this orientation, and then slowly we check it in different rotations to see if there's a match. So I might say, if doing it in reverse, have to shift it over this way by 1, so that we're starting from the other way around. And I'm sure we'll get there eventually. It's just testing the right combination of things, because it might be different as well for each shape, which is slightly irritating, but we'll work around it. And I'm sure once the new assets are done and we've got more of a standard for how those are laid out, that will get more consistent and we can get rid of a few edge cases over time. So we've got the editor up again. Go to here, let's see if it breaks this time. So if it's a memory issue, it could be just the editor's decided to kill itself for whatever reason. Because I've not actually really changed anything. I think the only bit of code that I introduced was the alternative reversal. And that's like not an out of bounds issue, because it's doing exactly the same thing up here but in reverse, so that shouldn't be a problem. Maybe it just didn't like me importing stuff as well, probably caused an issue. There we go, it's working now. I thought it wasn't my code. Sometimes I can't be sure though, like the issue that we were having yesterday. It took ages for us to figure it out. Very, very grateful again that that I got some help on that. And I hope Doc Title is on at some point today so I can thank him and show him the results. So let's see if the rotations are at least going in the correct order. So we've got that corner block seems to work, that corner block seems to work. This one seems to work as well. So I think it's doing what it should be. But we need to change the starting orientation for some of the blocks. So like the ramp one needs to be maybe rotated one round to the left or something like that. So if we go here, this could actually be quite a relatively simple change. Would be nice if all of the blocks had a consistent starting point, but unfortunately they don't. What I could do, I suppose, is I guess I could reverse the bit pattern order when we put it in, if it's for the bottom. So if I did like, if not top, and then just do like a bit pattern reversal or something like that, just swap things around. So up here, all we want to do is set the order to be inverted, and I'm trying to think of the best way to do that without having to introduce too many variables. I think we can save 0, set 3 to position 0, then set that like that. So just swap them around and then pretty much just do the same thing for the other two. And change that to 1. So let's just double check that. So we're taking position 1, assigning it to a temporary variable, swapping that with, or assigning that to the last position, and then setting the last position to position 1, that's fine. Same again for the middle 2. Yeah, that seems all good. Right, so now we've done that, we've essentially made it so that the patterns here align properly with what it is that we're supposed to be doing, and then we can revert this old rotation code that we had above back to what it should be, which was going in the other direction. And I think both reversing it and then reversing the rotation order of that part should offset the fact that it's rotating in reverse when flipped upside down. So let's try again. Tell you what I could maybe do, like start an art stream. Like, you know, pull up a bit of digital art while I'm waiting. There's loads of things actually that I could do like that. Like I could have a project on the side, or like an art thing on the side, have a game or two to play. I just don't really know what would be the most engaging for people to watch, really. I don't know, if anyone's got any suggestions, tell me. I wonder if maybe something's slower at the moment about my PC. Maybe I'm like installing a hidden like Windows update or something, so it normally doesn't take this long. Not for basic changes anyway. It would be nice actually if this was in, if I was doing this in Unity, I think. I mean, like feasibility wise, it's not really the right engine for this project, just because I need direct control over the performance of it, but like if I was to do another game development thing, like streaming, like if I was purely focused on just the stream quality, obviously like I care about the stream quality, but like if I was primarily focused on the stream quality, I think Unity would probably be the best engine to use because there isn't a compile time as such. Okay, how's this? So, is that in reverse now? Yeah, it's just facing the wrong way, so I just need to flip around the final rotations, which is infinitely easier than doing it the other way. So let me just double check I've got this right. Everything needs shifting around 180. So I can change that in the rotation code by saying that this starts off with the addition of 180, this is 270, this one's might be 0, wouldn't it? And this one is 90. I think that's right. We might need to start 180 at the bottom, but anyway, let's do one last test on that. So doing all of that reversal stuff that we did earlier, that's just made it aligned correctly. But whether or not it's the correct final rotation is separate as a problem. I feel like I should get some more music actually. So even though this is quite a big playlist, it gets a bit repetitive sometimes. See what stations they've got. There's a lot of EDM. Don't really like, not really a massive fan of EDM. There's a lot of hype as well, but again, don't want a lot of hype. There's Chill, that's got a lot of tracks. I'll give that a go. Anyway, it's built now, so there we go. That is exactly what we want, with the exception of the gap offset here. But that's not a problem with the actual generation system. That's just the fact that the origin's in not necessarily the wrong place, but in a place that means when we flip it 180, it actually offsets it slightly. So if we go into there's a bit of code where we set the world location, so I can copy that, and then whenever we're doing these rotations here, just as a temporary fix, I can put in this, but with an additional, I believe it would be 50 units. So that basically we're just temporarily taking into account the offset we get when flipping it around. And I believe this code should work. I can't see any reason why it won't. I did have issues trying to do relative offsets before, but if I just set its thing to be world dependent, then yeah, that should be a lot. Well, it's not necessarily more performant, but it's a solution that we already have, so might as well just use it for now, since we know that it's going to be removed in the future. See, that compile was a lot faster since we weren't affecting so many lines. Right, there we go, so we're built now. Has that changed it to what it should be? No. That's strange. So I would have thought that it's changing. So if we go back to the code quick. Maybe you can only set world location once, potentially. Let me look it up on the side. So if I look up, it's hard to know what to search for sometimes. If I look up C++, I guess relative offset, set relative location, here we go. So let's try this. Okay, so maybe it can't be changed at runtime. Maybe it has to like. I mean, regardless, anyway, the fact that it works is fine. Like the fact that it does what I know it should, and that the only issue is the origin. I think is something that I can kind of live with for now, at least until we've updated the models. I will ask Josh to fix the models based on my request for the thing that we need, which is just to have them scaled up by 2. And then we can start work on implementing the new meshes, and also that'll introduce us to being able to work on mesh culling as well, so like only loading in the meshes that are relevant at that given time, so that because we don't need to load in all of these for this circle, we only need to see the faces that are outward facing essentially. And that should be a relatively simple code challenge, because it's just checking whether or not there is anything next to that block side, and then we're just exposing that. So, I mean, there's a few edge cases, but for the most part it's relatively simple. Yeah, I mean, that's looking good. That's looking really nice so far. Really pleased with how this is turning out. Start experimenting with some different shapes in a bit as well. See if there's any issues that jump out or anything like that. Maybe merge a couple of circles together. So I don't know why it's so hard to find solutions to problems. The UE4. You would have thought that a lot of stuff is as simple as just calling like a generic function or something, but it just seems that it's almost impossible to, I don't know, find documentation for like C++ code. I know that Blueprints is supposed to be like a replacement for C++ code, and you should be able to use that, but if you want to have total control within the code for whatever reason, like I find it easier to program as opposed to using a UI. I don't see why there isn't a good set of documentation for that. And it seems like a lot of the forum posts are either outdated or not quite the thing I'm after. If we have a look at, I don't know, C++, UE4, set static mesh position, maybe. I think potentially, like with most things in Unreal, there positions and rotations and that kind of thing don't tend to like to be set outside of constructors. Like, there are functions for doing it outside of constructors, but they tend to be a bit harder to track down for some reason, like when looking at stuff through the docs. So I guess I could just mess around with a few things. If we go through to where are we now? I'm getting a bit lost in the code. Right, so if we go back to our rotation function here, I would have thought set world location would be fine. Maybe it's add. Oops. No, I would have guessed it didn't like that, to be honest. So if we do maybe it's add relative location, and then we'll see what that takes. F vector, yeah, that seems correct, I suppose. We'll just add in one of these and set that to 0, 0, 50. And of course we need another bracket on the end. Overwrite the rest of these. Compile that again. I think the add function is probably more meant for runtime stuff. I don't know why the set world location's not quite working properly. There's probably a reason, but one that I'm too naive to know about at the moment. Well, I won't say naive, just not well researched enough yet. Hopefully this will do something. If not, I can mess around with different values in the z-axis and see if that has any effect at all. No, you see that's kind of odd. Maybe there's some kind of setting, like maybe it's because it's a static mesh, it can't move, but I would have thought that static meshes could move. So my guess would be there's some kind of properties I need to change. Let's see what properties we can find. There might be some kind of like, there might be something like a Boolean or something that just allows us to, I don't know, I guess move it around. So static, maybe like a static property. What about move Maybe it's move component actually. Try that. No harm in trying. And then we'll copy this in. Okay, so doesn't like that obviously. Just stick another parameter in and see if that fixes it. No, not the right thing, not what I wanted. I would have thought that would be relatively simple, but apparently not. So we'll get rid of that for now. We've not lost anything really, we'll just worry about that later. So since our mesh assets are they're not quite up to date yet, I will just message Josh quick. Right, so I've sent him a message and hopefully when he's not busy, so I think he's at work at the moment, he'll be able to send me a new asset pack. So I'm going to have a quick look at the code and see if there's anything that we can update at the moment, anything that we can improve until we get those assets. And we probably won't get them today, to be honest, because he needs to not only be free but also have time to sort them all out. And I think he said there was 14 of them or something like that. Maybe we can check. We've got... Oh, it's not on this one. I think because it crashed, it must not have saved them. Yeah, there's a significant amount. I'll have a look at them in the folder. Re-import them quick. So 15 assets. So just to go through some of the ones that will make a big difference to the code, but not the code, sorry, the project. There is this one. Now this kind of shape will be great for like joining up two adjacent slopes or something like that that intersect diagonally, which actually we don't have for standard like horizontal block. Not horizontal, non-diagonal slopes. So this is kind of like a nice block that fits the rule set that we've implemented, which is each corner has to be lowered or raised, and that determines whether or not the shape is valid. So this is like an interesting piece because it still satisfies the rule set, but it's kind of a bit unusual, it's a bit different. There's also, I believe it's this one. This one's another interesting one because not only does it make use of a negative gradient, but it also has a positive gradient on it as well. So that will be primarily used where, let me bring the picture up again. Be primarily used where we've got these corner blocks. So traditionally we do want to limit our voxels to half height. But there are some cases where one corner, well I think it's actually the only case where this can happen, where we've got both a positive and a negative, but one corner can be raised and one corner can be lowered. So it's quite a nice addition to the block set where it doesn't quite break the rules, but it's unique in its own way, and it'll nicely fill in these corner edges. So rather than getting lots of jagged edges here, the only ones that we'll really see are where the hill starts to actually like drop off at these parts, and like up here for example, which actually fixes the majority of the issues with this shape in particular, because most of the ugliness comes from this side here. And some of the other pieces may also be fixed, but I don't think so. I don't think we have any special blocks that really do that. This is a variation on an existing block that we have. There's a corner piece that's similar to this. So this one. So it fills the same role in that one corner's raised up, but rather than having like a spine on it going up the middle, which this one has, this one's just kind of flat down that center line. So same use, but slightly different. So it could be like a variant that's used on, let's say we've determined that, okay, so this is a good example. So let's say all of these corners are flat, and this is the only corner that's raised. Then we'll use this one. But let's say all of the corners are lowered here, and this one's flat. Then we can use this block. So I don't know if that fully makes sense, but because we have the -1, 0, +1 system, we can choose which block we use, even though they're the same pattern, kind of. The pattern for one block is shifted up in the spectrum slightly of -1, 0, 1. And so we can choose a variant based on those properties. So it will give a slightly different look and feel depending on the configuration of its adjacent blocks, without any additional cost, any performance cost, or like any designer cost or anything like that. Like, you won't have to go through and decide individually which ones choose what shape. And we don't want it to be random either, because if we have elements of randomness, at least in the base editor, that's where it starts getting a bit unpredictable, and certain systems don't work too well together. Like the AI system, for example, and even the character system will rely heavily on collisions, but we don't want to necessarily rely on inbuilt collision masks, because we can do them in a more performant way. For example, we only need to know the height of this corner, and this corner to work out whereabouts the player is on this plane, and say, okay, let's take an average of these points weighted depending on how close they are to each point, and that'll give us the height collision for that plane. So we can actually get away with not relying on UE4's inbuilt collision system, but each block that we use has to follow the same rule set so that we can actually make use of that performance gain. Because we actually don't really need to take into account too many. Like, it might get to the point where we do actually rely on UE4's collision system, depending on how complicated the object system that has yet to be built is. But for terrain, at least, there might be a more streamlined way to do it, and that's an example of how that would work if we were to implement our own collision system for the floor. I don't think there's anything else that's too fancy, really. I don't think there's any blocks that are that special. No, again, I mean, there's that block. There's also its inverse, which is where the center's raised. I think it's this one. Although I think Josh has accidentally done the same block there. But that again will just be something I'll chase up with him, like saying, because it's hard to look at all of these models as a set when you don't have access to the engine. So it's good for me to receive them early, test them, and then send them back and say these are some tweaks or adjustments that we need making. So I think I'll sit down with him at some point and we'll work on improving those. And then once they're finished and we're both happy with them, he can start building different materials or like different color palettes for them, and take this, which we've currently got, which is just some basic color materials that I've put together as a programmer just to test it, and he can completely overhaul the look and feel of those blocks, which will be amazing. Like seeing the top face of all of these blocks be grass maybe, or the sides being like rock or something, or like dirt. Kind of similar to Minecraft blocks, but we have more freedom, like more flexibility. Like we could have a hybrid block where the sides are stone and the top is grass, or a block where the top is grass and the side is grass as well. Like there's so many things that we could do from a programming and customizability standpoint that it makes it a much nicer system. It's not like in Minecraft where you have one material type and that's it, and you just stick with that and you can edit that as a complete block. It's a lot more customizable, and I think we can get some really, really interesting results from that as well, especially when we start getting into continuous textures and things. So again, I'll bring this in to show you what I mean by that. So if we take this whole flat face as a single texture as opposed to lots of little textures, it means that we don't get a repeating pattern on that face, and so it should visually look a lot more interesting. And it's a technique that's used across many games. So if I look up Age of Empires 2 for example, and we go to the way they do this system, and this system was actually an inspiration for the one that I'm building currently, you see that their textures don't actually appear at first to repeat. Not properly anyway. There is repetition, but it's subtle. So the repetition happens over the course of many terrain blocks as opposed to just a single one like next to each other. I think that's probably most clear in their water, to be honest. It's probably very hard to spot from these images. I don't think it's easy to see. I've seen it in game, so I know that it definitely does repeat. But they hide it very well, and that's the plan with our system as well, is to take a system that we've already got and make it look as little like it is made out of cubes as possible, so that we still get all of the gameplay benefits, we still get all of the performance benefits, but we get away from it looking like a Minecraft clone, which is the whole point really. It's like, we want it to be customizable, want you to be able to edit the terrain, want it to follow a simple rule set so that it's easy to use, but we don't want it to look like it's a simple rule set. So it's a tricky balance, but it's one that's definitely possible, and it's one that we're currently working on. So, what to do next with this? So we can't do the block offsets for some reason, I'm not sure why. We can't work on the new render culling system quite yet, because we don't have the right assets for that just now. So what can we do? Let me think. You'll have to give me a minute. Okay, right, I've got an idea. So I said earlier, and I forgot about this, but I said earlier that we'll need not just a smooth cube, but also things like a smooth circle and a smooth sphere thing as well. So that's what we'll do. We'll essentially copy the implementation for this, but create something with a custom parameter list that can be used in these other functions which have slightly different setups. So if we make some new definitions, and in fact I'll just copy the last one. So these are the three planes that a circle can be produced on. Then we need one for ellipsoids. And in fact, because these aren't public facing functions, I can, instead of calling these circle, I'll call these ellipse, smooth ellipse, and then I can just reuse those in the circle functions and just pass in the right parameters. It's not like with these functions where the reason there's a circle and there's an ellipse function, like the reason there are both of those and they're not just one thing with adjustable parameters is because when a user will be looking for those tools, they might simply want to just select a circle and they might not want to use the ellipse brush. Like it might have slightly different properties or it might behave slightly differently. Same with, I think it's the same in like Photoshop actually, which is why I had the idea to split them up into two separate things. But since these are internal functions, other than them being on different axes, we don't actually need variants of them. So let's work out what parameter list we need for these. So they'll still take a min and a max, but we can think about it slightly differently now. So instead of it being, well no, let me go back on what I just said. So rather than it being a min and a max, we'll do something similar to how the circles work as a brush and take in a center point and a diameter, and then convert that diameter into a radius. So that's what we'll do. We don't need all three, we only need X, Y, and then we need a height. We'll just call that a Z. And then we need int diameter. I'm trying to think if we need any other additional parameters. I don't think so. Fairly certain we don't. So we can copy this parameter list down and just change things appropriately. Change that to X, so that's sorted. And then with the ellipsoid we had to take an XYZ center and then an XYZ diameter, so it's a bit more complicated, but it's essentially the same for how the regular actual brush works, so we can just copy those parameters down. Right, so on to the definition of these. So if we create them, first of all, it's a good place to start, and we go to where they're defined, which should be here. There we go. We can essentially try and copy the implementation of the voxel cube, the smooth cube that we've got, but change the way the selection process works. So like wrap this inner part with a function that determines whether or not it's within the radius of the circle, and it's not just part of the cube volume. So if we copy this entire thing, we need to determine basically what our min and max ranges are. Which in this case is, like, we need an additional parameter, we need a radius. So what we'll do is we'll take new variable called radius, make it equal to diameter divided by 2. And then for this part here, we need to take, I think it's the x center minus the radius, and see if it's less than 0. And if it is, then obviously we need to create a definition for that. And these all need definitions as well. So they're no longer parameters in this case, they're no longer things that are passed in. So here we need to say x center minus radius. Is this less than 0? So is it out of the bounds of the world? If it is, just return 0. If not, return the original result. And it's the same thing for everything else as well. Yeah, it's one of those things, it's a bit of a tedious process, but we'll get it working. There we go, and I've just realised this bit here, rather than it being like a Z center, because we don't have that parameter, it's just Z. And rather than minusing the radius, we're just minusing 1, because we want it to affect above and below. And that's it for our bounds checking. So now what we need to do is say we're only interested in the blocks essentially that are immediately around the circle. Now this will use the same equation that we use for the actual circle brush itself. So we can go to something like the, yeah, it's the ellipse one. And we can see how it was implemented here. So one thing that's important to note is it takes the, it edits where the center is based on whether or not it's even or odd, which is important. We'll have to factor that in. But put simply, it just wraps around this change voxel in an if statement which does some basic maths calculations and just sees if it's actually within the range itself. So we can copy that, go back down to where we were working before, put that up here. And this is where, like, if we hadn't had all of the other functions already in place, it'd probably get quite complicated because we've got a lot of stuff going on here. But thankfully, we can rely to some extent on other things. So something that I forgot about is, because this is an ellipse, we need not just the diameter, but we need the x, y, z diameter as well. So we can copy that implementation from circle again. So we need this offset code as well. But in the definition up here, we just need to add in a couple more parameters. In fact, no, it's just one parameter, it's just the y diameter. So yeah, we do need to update a few of these things. We need to update this to x radius again, and then this one's y radius. It'd help if I could actually type properly, that'd be a big bonus. Right, so we've got all of these in now. I believe that's everything, actually. This will probably throw an error in a second, so I don't think we have all of the variables defined. Oh no, we do. Yeah, we do have them all defined, so that's fine. That's all good. I think that function finished. I can't be certain. I'm fairly certain. I'm pretty sure it is. Like, we'll revisit this if any bugs arise. But as far as I can tell, it's actually correct, since we're using like a hybrid of two separate implementations. So right now we need to apply the same thing, but to the next two functions that we've built, or that we're going to build. And all we're doing here really is changing around a few of the parameters that we're using. So here we only really need to make minor adjustments. I think everything should be correct for the most part in terms of the parameters that we're passing in. It seems correct. We've got the X, Y, and Z. We've got the X diameter, Z diameter. That seems fine. I think it's just a matter now of updating everything to the right variable that we're using, essentially. And that's just a process of basically jumping around until we no longer get any errors. Right, so I think we're pretty much done apart from one part, which is inside of the testing function itself, where we need to change the way this works slightly. This Y variable can stay in place, stay where it is. We just need to change every instance of Y radius to Z radius, I think. Hello Raz, how's it going? Not too bad, yeah, just been slowly working through today's tasks. I can show you what we've been up to actually. When was the last time you were on stream? Did you see the voxel smoothing working, or did you just see like the circles being made? Fair enough. Well, I'll show you where we're at now actually, so we've made some good progress so far. Once it compiles, of course, because it'll take forever now. I've added a few things. So, I know you were on a while ago, but basically what we've got working now is all of the brushes work as far as I'm aware, but now we've introduced the idea of a smoothing system. So now that we can change each individual voxel's model, I've taken that tool that we have basically and made sure, hi duck, and made sure that whenever there's like a certain configuration of blocks around a block, we can change its model to better fit its surroundings. I'll show you what I mean in a second. I just need to fix whatever the compiler's having issue with. What doesn't it like? I'm guessing the definitions don't line up or something. There we go, stick that in there, should be fine. Let's recompile this quick. How's it going, Duck, anyway? That's good. Like, honestly, like, I'm so grateful for your help yesterday. Yeah, Raz, exactly. It's like a gradient, but the results are actually like more impressive than I thought they would be. At least on the circle that I've got to test it on, because I kind of had this system pictured in my head, and I thought it might be a bit janky and it might not always work, but the results are actually really good so far. But yesterday we were trying to get it working, and like I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. Turns out all the code was fine, and we'd gone through and bug tested everything. But I'd missed some breakpoints, which Duck like actually took the time to go off and find for me and fix, which like honestly, like it means so much to me, man. Like the fact that someone watches this stream, enjoys it, and not only that, participates as well is amazing. Like it's a great feeling. So I'll show you where we're at. So this is a kind of typical example of the use case that this would be applied to. And no, this isn't an extension. This is going to be for a game that me and my work partner are currently designing. And the idea is that we're going to build an RPG, but it's all kind of like modular and customizable. So it's a bit like, you know, you can make your own scenarios, if you will. Like if you guys have ever played like Age of Empires 2, that has like a really good little scenario editor where it's very simple, but you can do a lot with it. So that's the plan. Like build this voxel engine for that use case, essentially. Although I guess I could build it as an extension for Unreal. That'd be quite cool. But yeah, so as a DM, you find this interesting. That's cool. Yeah, like that was kind of the idea. Like we thought it would be really cool to have like that Dungeons and Dragon-esque thing where like you can set up a world. And the world might not be very complicated, don't get me wrong, like it's probably going to be very simple gameplay-wise, but you can set up a scenario and allow people to just kind of explore that and exist in that scenario and see what the players do. So it might be that we implement some kind of like dungeon master system where you can have people guiding the experience. But that's something that is like a design decision that we're putting off for now. And thanks for saying that it's cool. Like I'm really happy with it. And when I got it working yesterday, thanks to Duck's help, like it was so satisfying. Like I couldn't tell you how happy I was that it actually worked out how I expected it to. Because I did have doubts about it actually playing ball and kind of coming together properly. So. Yeah, exactly. Like that's like it's a really flexible, I guess, piece of tech. That's why I was really interested in building it, because it's like with you see a lot of voxel games on that people are like developing to like practice programming and everything, or to build like a simple game like Minecraft. But I didn't just want to do that. I wanted to take some similar concept from it, but take it a little bit further, like in the underlying technology behind it, and introduce shapes as well. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen or played Space Engineers or something like that, but they have a really interesting building system, and this is kind of inspired by that as well, in a way. But obviously our terrain isn't quite deformable in the same way or anything. We will be able to edit the terrain on the fly, so if an explosion, for example, happened in the game, you could in theory take chunks out of the terrain if you really wanted to, because this is something you can edit on the fly. It just so happens that I've had to hard code everything now just to test it, but there's no reason why from a user point of view you couldn't edit this terrain in real time, and that's the eventual goal. You don't know what game to make the tools you would want to see being used to make it. Boneworks came to be. Yeah, that's kind of the idea. So like I've always been very interested in like modular games, I suppose, and games that offer a bit more flexibility. I don't tend to like games that are heavily scripted, purely because as someone who's played so many different games, you kind of get bored of the same encounters a lot of the time, and you want to experiment and you want to do your own thing. And games like Minecraft are great for that, but it is limited to one type of experience. So I thought, well, why not build an engine that facilitates terrain deformation and that kind of thing, but could be applied to any context. So like one example of an idea that I had was to make an RTS game using this system. Now, I don't know if it's feasible, because you'd probably run into all kinds of performance issues and like multiplayer issues and stuff like that, but it's an interesting idea. And at least now we have a foundation to work with, terrain-wise. Right, so back to the code that we were doing. So I think I fixed this function now. Seems fine. Just my parameter list here needs updating. I did actually see Boneworks. I think it's that VR game, isn't it? And like I think that looks super cool. Like if I had a VR headset, like I'd really want one of those, the new Valve headset. Really want to get my hands on one of them and play Boneworks. I think it'd be really fun. Getting one for work, that'd be sick. What kind of stuff is it you do? Do you do games as well, or do you do something else? Unity VR dev. Oh yeah, no, that would be sick. Yeah, doing it for uni. I think we've got some VR gear at my university, but it's kind of hard to get your hands on because so many people rent it out for like final year projects and stuff. For the aerospace department, that would be awesome. I guess it would be really good as like a training tool to use that kind of headset. Public VR lab, that would be sick. So, like, out of curiosity, like, if you don't mind, like, what kind of research is it that you're doing? Have you got like a specific research project that you're working on, or is it more just setting up VR in general for the department? Okay, that's cool. Okay, so I think I've updated all the variables for this now. Kind of tedious work, and sometimes you don't know if it'll work until you test it, because to be honest, I can't afford like the energy to think everything that I've just done through properly and know if it'll work, but I'm fairly confident that it will. This one's going to be a bit more complicated, this function. Not by a lot, but still going to be a bit more challenging to put together. If I copy this. I always think that like working with the VR headset stuff, like I feel like it does honestly have the potential to be the future of games. Like, I don't think there's any way around that. Like, it will be pivotal to gaming and industry as well. But for whatever reason, you don't really see it, I guess, used properly because the know how to use it and the support and the financing and everything just isn't there right now. Yeah, it's kind of like a new generational thing. I think actually in hindsight, looking at this code that I'm doing right now, I made a mistake because I didn't put the right radius information in the right place. I'll edit that in a second. Good job I spotted that. I've just spotted it now, so I've just copied and pasted it from somewhere. But I'm trying to assign Y radius stuff to the X min and max, which obviously isn't right. I'd say yeah, it does have limitations in a sense, but I'd also argue that they're getting rid of a lot of those limitations over time. Like, a lot of the technology now is catching up. Like, one of the things that most people complain about with VR is the lack of mobility, but there's that product called the Virtuix Omni that's like that multi-directional treadmill thing. So I could quite easily see how, say, using something like that could solve a lot of problems for a lot of people, kind of industry-wise, who would be a bit reluctant to adopt it. Yeah, no, I do agree that it's like it's not reasonable for consumers. It is kind of a niche. Although I would like to see it get a lot cheaper. I think eventually when it does kind of take off as an industry, that people will begin to get accessories like that and it will become more readily available, just like it is with any PC accessory, I suppose. Out of curiosity, guys, like, I know you watch my stream at a particular time of day. Do you like get back from work or like from wherever it is you like go day to day at this time, or is it more just like, I don't know, just a good time for you? Because I'm trying to work out when I should put these videos up and maybe when the best time to stream is, and I feel like I do it a bit too early at the moment. I know that 2 o'clock's far too early for most people. You say you're at work. Out of curiosity, what country are you from? Like, is it the UK? US. Okay. Maybe that's who I should be. You're a student. Okay. Maybe that's who, like, what I should be going for, like targeting people that work in office jobs and want to watch this kind of content on the side, like people who do programming for a living, maybe. Because you guys seem like super interested in this stuff, which like I find great, but I don't get many people on early in the day, so Obviously, being in the UK, it's a different time zone, so I can't just stream for, you know, British people, because not a lot of people in Britain, like relatively speaking, are programmers. There's a good subsection, don't get me wrong, but I would say a lot of them aren't that into Twitch. Usually get in between 8 and 9. Okay. So maybe 3 o'clock would be a better time to start, and then drag it out a bit later. Kind of to hit the US time zone, you know? Okay. I don't want to run the risk of hitting a time where it's like super oversaturated, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't want to come on exactly when everyone else is streaming, just because I don't think... I don't know if my content is good enough to compete with some of the more established people. And don't get me wrong, I do want to make my content better, but... Fair enough. Thank you for saying that anyway, it means a lot. Oh bugger, I put that in the wrong place. You know what, fuck it, I'm just going to change them to... So what kind of content does Handmade Hero do? Does he do programming as well, or is it a bit different? Yeah, no, I'll take your feedback on board, because what I've noticed tends to happen is I will be building stuff like 2 o'clock, won't have any viewers, or maybe have one person come on, and then typically towards the end I can sometimes jump up to like 10. I think 10 is about the peak that I've hit before. A game engine guy writing a game engine in C. Oh, that's pretty cool. I've considered doing that kind of thing. I mean, this is kind of a game engine, I suppose. I mean, it's a game engine in the loose sense that it's a tool set for building a game. Like, it's not quite, but I guess you guys know what I mean. I'm just going through the code now and just double checking everything. So I think I made some, well, like I said earlier, I made some copy paste mistakes. Okay, that's interesting. Do you think it's better, in your opinion, to watch someone who's kind of more of at like an accessible level? Like, is it more enjoyable to watch from the point of view like that you guys kind of more understand what it is that I'm programming and I'm not using complicated techniques and stuff like that? Is that more appealing, or is it just convenient to watch my stuff? Okay, fair enough. Yeah. What I hope to kind of deliver with some of this is something that is maybe kind of a bit complicated in the theory side, but not too complicated in terms of programming concepts. Not interested in the complexity. Yeah, that's something that kind of puts me off in C++. Like, I guess it's a great language, it's flexible, and you can literally use it to do anything, but at the same time, it's like it overcomplicates some of its concepts a little bit too much to appeal to that broader audience, and also it carries with it some of the old like legacy C stuff that made sense at the time but isn't really, I guess, as important now. Like an issue that me and Duck were going through yesterday was whether or not the arrays that we were passing through to a function were being referenced as an array pointer rather than just the typical just like a typical data type, really, that you can access as you would any other piece of data. And it can be useful when trying to do more powerful things, but if you're just approaching it from kind of everyday problems and like you just want to do something simple, especially with games development, it's kind of just, it can be a bit of a handicap because you have to know the exact implementation of the language and not just express the thing that you want to do as you would expect it to be written, I suppose. When it gets down to the engine level stuff, a lot of stream is watching someone flounder with some super low level thing for hours. Yeah, I kind of get that. I've done some engine stuff myself, not a lot, but I did work with DirectX for a university assignment where we didn't have to, but I ended up building a kind of game framework completely from scratch using like Win32 and that kind of thing. And it was fun and it was a learning experience, but I feel like I could have done the same thing a lot faster had I been using just a more concise language. And I feel like if I'd have streamed that, it really wouldn't have been fun to watch because half of it was just me looking up things that I know how to do from a conceptual point of view but don't know how to actually program. And like you say, there are so many ways of doing the same thing, so it's like you don't always know what's the best way to do it or what's the industry way to do it. And as someone who likes to know the best way so that I can develop good practice, it's infuriating because you can spend half of your time just working out the best way to do even simple things like if statements, you know? Like you might end up slaving away for hours getting the right set up in a complicated set of if statements just for performance reasons. And the compiler really hasn't caught up very fast with C and stuff because the language is so complicated. So every time they want to do like a major compiler update, they have to factor in so many different parts of the language. So it's not a very like adaptive technology, I suppose. And like you say, it is kind of, it's not very appealing to watch somebody do that for hours. Anyway, so I've passed in all the right data now, I think. So I've got the right data type set up, and now I just need to copy the code from the ellipsoid function, wherever that is. Here we go. So we've got this bit of code that's important because that takes care of our centering issue if we're using an even number of blocks. We need this in there. And in fact, we can probably just stick that inside of here itself so that we're not doing it unnecessarily. I'll do that up in the other functions as well. So yeah, we don't want to be initializing all these variables if we don't actually end up using them, because this only happens if voxel smoothing's on, really. And now we need the actual equation for determining whether or not our point is within the ellipsoid, and it was this that we used before. So all we're doing is we're basically taking the same smoothing algorithm and just sticking it in an if statement that only runs the smoothing if it's within the radius. So exactly the same concept, just with a wrapper and a few extra variables just for that calculation that we've got in here. I don't think there's anything really too complicated behind it. It's not anything that we haven't already been through on stream anyway, let's put it that way. It's more just mixing existing concept. So I'm just double checking it quick just to see if there's anything that stands out that will be an issue. Like maybe I've written it wrong or something. No, I think that should be fine. I believe actually now that is everything as far as the additional smoothing code goes that we've got. So we can implement those in the original brushes, in the brush functions. If we start at the top, we've got change voxel circle. So for this one we want to use, what would it be? So we would take smooth ellipse XY, because this is on the XY plane. And all we need to do really is pass through the parameters that were passed through to the voxel circle function initially. And we've named them the same thing, so that makes it even easier to know what it is that we're actually doing. Hi, MS dev. I don't think I've seen you on stream before. Yeah, like, I guess I could do that to some extent, but I don't know, it's tough. Like, it seems like in this case I am repeating a lot of things, but when you actually look at the implementation it does need to be slightly different, just because I'm passing in like different data. It looks very similar, but it isn't exactly the same. I am trying to make use of object orientation where appropriate. I'm not entirely sure if it's appropriate here. So if you've never been on the stream before, I'll give you a quick overview of what this entire class does. We've got all of our core voxel data. We've got a function which is the kind of low-level changing an individual voxel. and then all of the helper functions that uses. And then we've got all our different brushes, some smoothing algorithms, and some things that help with the smoothing algorithms, basically. I don't think there's any complexity currently that we need to really worry about in terms of OOP. If I'm wrong, then please let me know. Like, if you can see any obvious, I guess, improvements that I could make, then obviously I want to know about them. Fair enough. Sometimes it can be hard to like see another person's code and know exactly what's going on, so I get it. So this is where I need to be a bit more careful on this function here, because we're no longer using XY, we're using XZ, which means I think I need Z center here instead, and Y center. I believe that's correct. Let me just double check what parameter goes there. Yeah, Y. So hit the Y center there. Same thing for the next one. But this time we're doing the YZ plane. If you don't mind telling me, Dev, like, out of curiosity, because I've asked the other guys as well, what is it that, like, when is it that you come to my stream? Are you like at work, or are you at school, or are you at home? Because I'm trying to work out a good time for streaming currently. Since I think this is my 5th stream now, 5th or 6th, so trying to work out when's the best place to come online. Seem to get a lot of viewers around this time, which I find interesting. It's also kind of difficult being from the UK, knowing whether or not anyone would be interested from my time zone. But so far, I don't know if I've got many viewers from the UK actually. I guess I can check the stream widget that I've got. I don't know if it's accurate. So we've got one person from Iran, one person from Norway apparently. Yeah, that's what Raz said. Raz said that, like, it's kind of US, like, it's early morning in the US, but it's when some people get into work. I think Raz is still watching. So just in case you've just joined the stream and you don't actually know what I'm doing right now, I'm just implementing, well, I've just finished implementing some variations on a voxel smoothing algorithm, and now I'm just allowing the voxel brushes that I've made to call that smoothing algorithm. And once it's finished, I'll run it and show you the effect of that. Although nothing will have changed for people that have been watching already today, but I guess it's good to show people. It's a bit of a copy and paste job. Not the most interesting thing in the world, but I am nearly finished with it, so bear with me. I think I've only got 2 more things to do now. Interesting, actually, the viewer map, I think is quite... I don't know if it's like real time or not, or if it preserves its count, because we're getting somebody watching from Norway, got Iran, we've got Bolivia apparently. I don't know if that's someone watching now or if it's someone watching in the past. Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's interesting to see where people are from, to be honest. I think that will give me a better idea of where to try and target. Although it's strange that the US isn't showing up, actually. Unless you guys are using a VPN, of course. Or like your company like uses a proxy or something. Okay, so I think all of the things are in now. There's the last 2, which are changing the voxel sphere. So I'll need to custom write that one because it's a different parameter list. But we've got smooth ellipsoid. So we'll use the smooth ellipsoid function because I know it's a sphere, but we'll just use it because it's basically does the same job. We've already got the X, Y, Z centers. So that's something we can just pass straight in. Okay, Raz, are you in like, I'm guessing you're in like halls or something at the moment? Like student accommodation? Oh, in your office, okay. Oh yeah, that's it. It's you work for them, don't you? Sorry. Yeah, I remember now. I'll have to try and like remember what everyone does, I think. Take 1 course a semester for free, that's pretty cool. Maybe I need to get a job at a university after this. Although to be honest, I don't know if I'd be any good at teaching. Like I can do live coding, but you know, that's probably as far as my expertise goes, to be honest. Right, so my function should now all be set up. This is the bit where I wait for a long time for it to compile, so I guess we'll just chat for a bit. You just work with Blender and Unity all day? That sounds like a fun job, I'm not gonna lie. What's your kind of like official position or like title, if you don't mind me asking? 'Cause it's kind of interesting that that's what you work with in your day job, because not many people, I guess, use just those 2 tools. Okay, just Unity developer, fair enough. I don't know if our university does anything like that. the university that I go to, it's like, for whatever reason, they don't seem to have like a lot of cross-department collaboration. Like they do, the departments aren't set up properly, and each course is very well put together, don't get me wrong, but like they don't do a lot in the way of student experience work and that kind of thing. Yeah, I'm in the UK. So I don't like universities over here don't tend to be set up in quite the same way as they are in the US. I think US universities, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they probably make more money through admissions and stuff like that. They probably have a lot more at their disposal, like staff-wise and resource-wise and stuff. With our education, it's more, I'd say more like dry, I suppose is the best way to put it. Like they give you your education and that's it. There's not much extra stuff that they do other than the standard, like, oh, they've got our uni has like a GP, like a doctor's that we can go to. I think that's funded by the NHS, and other than that, like they don't have too many departments. So looking at the thing that has just been built, like it's not caused any issues, the voxel smoothing's still working, so I have to assume that this is correct now. Yeah, that sounds fair. Like internationally, like I don't think we get many students over here. We do get a lot of our competitor university, which is Sheffield Uni. I go to Sheffield Hallam University. At Sheffield University, they get a lot of students from China and I think Japan as well, which I thought was kind of strange, but I think they've got some kind of student exchange relationship going on with other universities there. Oh, my messenger's going mad. I'll just turn that off quick. There we go. Part of a few group chats, so... They love the UK. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it'd be nice to think that somebody likes the UK, so I don't even think most people from the UK like the UK. I certainly don't think the UK is that special, to be honest. There used to be a lot of like patriotism and stuff like that, especially in like generations past, but it's not really trickled down to, I'd say, our generation that much, really, because there's not much. I won't say the UK is bad by any means. It's just there's not a lot to get excited about at the moment, especially with everyone having to leave the European Union. There's like a lot of uncertainty about the UK right now, and like where we sit globally and everything. And I suppose it's the same in a lot of European countries as well right now. So wait for Unreal to restart quick. Oh, do I have to select? Oh, I can select them all. Good. I thought I was going to have to manually re-import everything then. If, by the way, I don't really like to do plugs all too often, but if you are new to the channel and you kind of just enjoy this more conversational thing where I do programming and stuff in the background, then please follow, like it'd mean a lot. I know that a lot of my viewers are repeat viewers, so if you're already followed, then obviously you can't follow again, but if there's anyone new, by all means, please follow along. So what else do we have to do? So there's another task that I was originally going to do today, and I don't know if I still want to do it, so it's a big undertaking. But that's to do some safety handling in terms of like making sure my arrays aren't accessed out of bounds. But because I have to target so many edge cases, that might take a while, and I've got to plan out like a nice elegant solution for that. So I figure I'll do something else for a bit until like 5 o'clock. We'll just like mess around with brushes and see what we can get, I guess. Because I know that we've been building up to this point where we've not actually had a lot on screen right now, and we're kind of at a point now where we can test the result of the last however many streams that we've done. So if I go to the top where my brushes are hard-coded in, what would be interesting? I guess merging a few circles would be quite cool, but I want to take it one step further and I want to disable smoothing and see if that works properly. So if I take this variable here and set it to false, and then I do the same thing, like I spawn in another ellipsoid. I will change the parameters just so it's not so large because it lags it out, but so to explain what I mean by accessing out of bounds parameters, quick, I'll show you. So in these functions, we actually do this safety check where we're basically making sure that the volume that we're trying to access isn't outside of the bounds of the world. Because we're accessing the brush size that we've just used, we could be actually painting that brush on the world boundary, so we need to make sure that the range that we're covering for our shapes don't exceed those world boundaries. But taking it one step further, because the smoothing itself adds 1 to... Rather, sorry, no, it doesn't add 1 to the... So down here, I mean, when it's like adding or taking away 1 from its positional indexing, like checking adjacent sides and that kind of thing. Let's say if you're butted up against one side of the world and you're checking x-1, you're obviously going to get some kind of read access violation because you're trying to read outside of the bounds of the block array. So there is something else I could do, which is, I guess, expand the world boundaries by 1 in each direction, but I feel like that's kind of a cheaty solution and would probably cause me more problems down the road. So what I need to do at some point, and what I'll probably do off stream, because I know it'll be a boring and drawn out process, is I will implement some kind of safety implementation to make sure that we're not doing this array checking whenever it's not appropriate. So in this case, I'll just say if this value is like less than 0, then it automatically doesn't do anything or something. I might not get an error as such, but I will, like, not always anyway, but there is the possibility that I do at points, and even if that isn't the case, I'll end up getting junk data, like it will end up reading in junk data, which probably won't be that big of an issue because it clamps it between 0 and -1 anyway, but still, it's not not ideal. It's not how I want it to behave anyway, so I do need to add that off stream at some point. But yeah, so let's go back to the brushes. So we've set some of them to, we've set this one to be false. And then what I'm going to do is offset that slightly by 5, so I'll put that position 20. And then I'll turn that back on. Copy this one again. Just to get a sense of how it behaves. And I will set this one at... That's diagonally, so go back down to 15 and 25. So I think what this will do, so the expected result is it will paint a block, or a sphere rather. That sphere will be smoothed. Then it'll overwrite any bits that it's touching with cubes. And then this one should overwrite any of the bits that overlap with the cubed sphere with smoothed blocks, but it'll also smooth adjacent blocks so that it connects a little bit better. That's what I think will happen, and I hope will happen, so we'll test that out. There we go, compiled. I wonder if it'll be a little bit faster so the volumes are smaller. I'll see you later, man, and thanks for your help with all of this. It's been really cool. What's happened here then? Okay, I think it is the thing I want, it's just not smoothed it properly. If I go to get rid of... I'll get rid of this plane because I think it obscures a lot of stuff. That's weird. Did I might have accidentally compressed the boundaries of that a little bit. It shouldn't be flat. Most definitely should not be flat like that. Let me have a look. Oh yeah, no, I changed the wrong parameter by accident. What I wanted to do yeah, no, all that's correct now. So let's run it again. So if we play that, so I kind of expect both sides to be slightly different. One should have connective smoothing and one won't, because it's kind of like overwriting it. So it looks like this was the one that was placed first. So this one's kind of just been taken over by square cubes. This is the right result that we wanted here. So this one has not overwritten its adjacent blocks and tried to smooth them out a little bit, which is great. Now in this one, on the other hand, this one here, what should have happened is at points it should have tried to overwrite the smoothing and connect it properly like it has done on this block. Now I would have expected it to have a slightly larger radius, so maybe I've missed something there. Let me double check. Ah, I know what I've not done. I've not added an additional one to that. I guess I could, like, I've not added an additional one to the smoothing radius, but I could do that as like a separate setting so that smoothing could just either be local to the shape or it can be like connective. I guess that would be an interesting feature. I will test that out quickly by adding that additional one to the radius in. I just have to find it, bear with me 1 second. So if I go up to the change voxel ellipsoid thing, we want to add, I guess 2, because it's the diameter that we're adding to and not the radius. So we want to add 2 blocks around that, so that when we're applying smoothing, it will take into account all of the blocks around the space, and it will also deform those if it thinks that the thing that you've just put into the scene warrants a change. So let's take the example of putting a cube into a scene. Let's say you've put that into the middle of a hill. In theory, with this extra buffer, the hill will then conform to the block that you've put in. And we should be able to see that now. Yeah, so it looks a bit odd, to be honest. This block hasn't got the right block in yet, so that's not actually an error or anything. That's just because we don't have the right shape to fill in there. But yeah, so what it's tried to do here is it's tried its best to fill in the things around this sphere to make them connect to the nearby shape properly. So it is doing what we want it to, essentially, and I think it's done the same for where it's connecting here to this other circle. So if you see on this side, it's not the same. This is all just ramps, and this is solid blocks and a corner slope. So it actually morphs with anything nearby, which is great. That's exactly what we want it to do. So I guess that's kind of a good place to leave it, actually. Like I say, I've got some safety stuff to implement. That'll happen in the back end. And also for the next stream, I kind of want to think about, you know, where is this going next? What feature's most important? So I will call the stream there for now. If any of you haven't watched me before and you want to follow along this game development, we're basically just building a game from scratch, including this voxel engine. So please leave a follow if you haven't already. If you've got any questions, I'll hang around for a couple of minutes. And yeah. So thanks for watching, I suppose. Like it does mean, it genuinely means a lot to me that I've got people watching this. I know it's not like the biggest, you know, watch account in the world, but I hope that what I make is somewhat helpful to people, even just in a small way. So right, I don't see any questions or anything like that, so I'll call it there now. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll be back. I think my next scheduled thing is on Tuesday, but that might change a little bit. See you later, Raz, and I think Duck's already gone. But yeah, have a nice time. I'll see you when I'm next scheduled. Bye.